This broadcast is the property of Codependents Anonymous. Reproduction without written permission from Codependents Anonymous is not permitted.
Okay. So this is September 26, 2020, and our topic matter for the Fellowship Forum today is, let's talk about sponsorship. And so with that being said, I pulled out, because I love every now and then to review the sponsorship, what's in it for me. It's a great piece of literature that we have available to us and is for sale through our literature sales from Core Publishings. And so I'm going to just cover a couple of the main points and then open up for discussion, because I'm really looking for input from individuals. So part 1 on page 2, it says the sponsee's perspective. It says working with a sponsor is one of the key tools of recovery. And in the handbook, it says we'll explore issues, possible solutions, personal benefits gained from participating in sponsorship, both as a sponsee and as a sponsor. Sponsoring relationships in Coda are generally a 3-way partnership comprised of sponsees, sponsors, and our higher power, however we recognize. And there's various forms of sponsorship. There's a traditional sponsorship, which means, hey, so-and-so, I like your recovery. Would you be willing to be my sponsor? Let's start working the steps and traditions together through the Coda workbook. And we stay together as that relationship for as long as that should last. I was reminded when I first started in this program that sponsors and sponsees, it's not a lifelong relationship. It's not like till death do us part. Sometimes it ends up being a temporary sponsorship, which is the next form, which is called temporary sponsorship. If sometimes when we start in program, we really need a sponsor like now, and we don't have time to wait for the perfect sponsor to come along. And so that's where that temporary sponsorship comes along, where, hey, you have more time in the program. Can you sponsor me for now? Let's get started. Okay, and that's happening quite a bit right now with so many of our meetings going on virtual, meaning on virtual platforms where we're not in the rooms as much as we used to be. We don't have options as far as that's concerned. So temporary sponsorship might be a very good way of getting started there. There's also co-sponsorship. That is where 2 individuals say, hey, I need a sponsor. Hey, yeah, I need a sponsor too. Hey, let's work together. Let's sponsor each other together. And I've had that experience early in my recovery program where there wasn't a sponsor that was available to me. And so I struck up a co-sponsorship that I think that lasted for about a year, and it was beneficial for as long as it went. There's also long distance sponsorship, where I think that's going to be happening more and more, where we're in Zoom meetings, we're in virtual meetings, and we meet someone through those virtual meetings and we think, oh my gosh, I like the recovery that I see. Are you willing to sponsor me? And they're clear across the country or across the world, and yet we can work that sponsorship that way. There's another form of sponsorship that's not listed in the book, and that is inmate sponsorship. And we're going to be touching about that as well. A lot of folks don't maybe know that we have a committee called Hospitals and Institutions, or H&I as we like to abbreviate. And they receive requests from inmates or various programs where they're looking to start their recovery through Coda, and they're looking for a sponsor. And that sponsorship is done via, I call it snail mail, regular mail. You throw it in an envelope and you correspond that way. And that's another form of sponsorship that is really great way of being able to be there. So I'm going to kind of open it up with some questions, and I'm looking for some comments. I'm looking for some engagement and whatever comes about with this conversation as we're going to have it. So I'm kind of excited about this. So hopefully you all know how to raise your hand. If you don't know how to raise your hand, you can send me a chat and just say, hey, I'd like to share. But question of, what is it like for you? What is your experience of being a sponsor or being a sponsee? And what are the gifts that you've received on being on either side? And with that, I'm going to wait for some volunteers. Okay, Margarita, your hand is up. Thank you.
Thanks, Gail. I started the program about 3 weeks ago, the Coda program, and I found a temporary 14-day sponsor probably on my second meeting, because I enjoyed one of her shares, and she was quite an experienced member, and she put her hand up to be a 14-day sponsor. I gave her a call and we had a chat, and since then, every time I complete my day, she replies to my email that same day and sends me the following question. And sometimes she will, having gone through my answers, ask me a few extra questions to think about. We're both pretty busy, so at the moment we're finding that email works really well, and there's not a lot of pressure to do it, because I think that the first 14 days and the beginning has been very hard for me anyway. And sometimes I thought that I'll just do one day at a time, but sometimes it takes me a few days to get through one question, and a whole heap of emotions and up and down and a few steps forward and a few steps back. So I found that really, the way that that's been working, really good. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing. Okay, I see no hands raised, so I'll take a moment to share. My name is Gail, and I'm a recovering codependent and very grateful for this program. When I first started in this program, my life was so upside down. And the first probably month in the rooms, all I did was cry. But I kept listening to what everyone kept sharing, and I kept hearing the words, keep coming back, don't give up, keep coming back. And so I was really listening to the shares, and I was lucky in that meeting that they really stressed the importance of having a sponsor to work the program, to not work this program solo, because, you know, being a person of isolation, of I can do everything myself, I don't need anyone's help, all those wonderful little coping skills that I had created from my childhood, growing up and into adulthood to survive life. And I can honestly say that my first sponsor was probably not the healthiest sponsor I had, but I had nothing to compare to. But that sponsor got me started, and that's the important thing. It's progress, not perfection. But what they kept reinforcing to me, which is probably what my higher power needed to get through to my brain, was keep coming back. Don't give up on this. This is not a quick program. This is not an I program. This is a we program. You can't do it alone. And those were the messages I kept hearing and hearing and hearing. And I ended up in a group study, instead of a one-on-one study group, it was a group study of about a dozen of us ladies. And that was how I kind of got started with my program. And from there, I've had various different forms of sponsorship. I've had the co-sponsorship. I've had out-of-state, long-distance sponsorship. I've had various different forms of sponsorship. And with that, I'm going to pass. And Jim, I see that your hand is up, so go, Jim. You'll have to unmute yourself. Can you unmute? There you go.
I got it. That's why I always ask. I have a pretty strange story myself. I lost my daughter, and I was at the bottom. I was a mess, and I realized myself that I needed help. But I had a lot of eye problems, and I couldn't drive a car. Well, I wasn't supposed to drive a car. So I went to a counselor, and I went to him for about 2 months, and I said, I can't keep coming up here because I'm going to wreck the car. And he said, well, try going to a Coda meeting. That way I could take the bus. I could take the county bus. I'd call them and arrange a ride. And I went to the church, and it was all girls. So I was numb. I was frozen, and I was shy, and I had a hard time talking or even relating. But after the meeting, I knew it was working. I knew I was in the right place, and I did cry a lot. But after every meeting, I would go outside on the bench and wait for the bus, and the girls would come out and they would talk to me one at a time, and different girls all the time. They were my sponsors. And I remember one time I took my workbook into the meeting and I started reading my answers. And when I got, I didn't know any different. And when I got to the end of my share, they said, bring it back next week and read your answers. This is a pretty big meeting. There's like 15 people there. But that was my sponsorship, and that's how it worked. And I had a wonderful experience. And then I went to a Coda Retreat the following June. I guess it was almost a year after that. And I had a miraculous change in everything and at that retreat, like a lot of people do. I went to a men's meeting where you talked about all the men in your life, and I had problems with every time somebody in our life would die, my wife would go off the rails and I'd have to commit her. That's why I'm in the hospitals, institutions. I'd have to commit her, and I felt so bad for all the people waiting in the waiting room. My son had a lot of problems too, and he's been in all the county jails around here. And I would go see him, and I'd see all the people waiting, and I saw the pain, and I felt it. So that H&I has always been my direction. But from Wildwood, I wound up going to the Coda Service Conference, and I met so many wonderful friends. And my journey was just, I met so many wonderful people who helped me so much along the way. I wound up getting in with the real professionals. I'm not going to start naming names, but they just, all the way up the line, I had sponsors to help me, but I never named them a sponsor. And when I had to go to San Diego, I walked up to a guy and I asked him to be my sponsor. And I just lost him a month ago. And he was a wonderful person. But I did finally find a sponsor, and he helped me a lot. But my journey, and I think Coda is like that. But a point I wanted to try to make was a lot of people I work with, they come from other programs, and they don't really understand what Coda is. And they come to us and they say, I'm sick, I'm really sick, I got to get better. But it's not something that can happen overnight. And for me, it's a program that's going to be for the rest of my life. So I try to encourage them to read the Blue Book as much as they can so that they have a really good background in Coda and they understand what they're undertaking. They're undertaking to change their whole life. They're undertaking to change all their behavior. And a lot of people think they're going to come in and get better right away, but that's not, in my experience, how it works. It took me 5 years, and I'll get into this later. It took me 5 years before a person came to me, and that's when the sponsorship journey started. But that's my take on sponsorship: to be patient and to listen. You have to listen to your sponsee because they're all different. When they come to you, you can't just say, "Here's the first question," because you don't know how they relate to the questions you're going to ask them. So you want to be patient and listen to the sponsee and put yourself in their place and give it some prayer and give it some meditation. And they're all, each one, an individual, and they're all very special in their own way. So as part of your journey, you have to learn to listen so that you can give them back what they need. So that's my take on sponsorship. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Jim. Anyone else ready to share or wish to speak? Okay, I'm going to keep filling in the blanks as we go. Please raise your hand if you do wish to speak, or send me a chat. One of the things I wanted to be able to say about the gift of being in a sponsor-sponsee relationship is that it's just, for me, I'll speak for the me, it's as much as a gift for me to be a sponsor as it is a sponsee, because I find that my higher power has a wonderful way of pointing out to me things that I may need to revisit, or things that I haven't even considered visiting, didn't even know I needed to visit. And yet my sponsees will bring up a topic matter, a life situation, either in the past or the current, and I will almost automatically go inside my head and kind of laugh at my God, saying, oh, I guess it's time for me to revisit this particular issue, because here it is now in my face again. And so, we have a piece of literature in our Coda Fellowship about, peeling the onion. And for me, it's a reminder that I'm constantly having the opportunity, should I pay attention, to peel the onion of my my lifelong childhood or whatever traumas that have come along in my life. I sometimes am amazed at, once I get to know a new sponsee, and I realize some of the things that we have in common from our past lifetime. And it's mind-boggling how God works that way with me. And it gives me the opportunity of being able to say, I understand, I get it, I've been there, and let's work through this together for you. And for me, that is a confirmation that is a very holy and blessed relationship that I get to have with that individual for however long that they're in my life and I'm in their life. Because it's like our journeys, our paths. We are on the same path through this particular program, and perhaps through other programs as well, because I have another program I work. But that sometimes our paths get to cross together, where we're on the same, we're walking together through something, and then we go our separate ways, in various different forms. And in the sponsorship booklet, it talks about how when we come together to work as a sponsor and sponsee relationship, it may end up, even though we say we want this to be a long-term relationship, it may end up being a short-term relationship. But that for the amount of time that we were together, it was intended to be that way, until it's no longer intended to be that way. And I remember, I have to admit, the first couple times that I fired my sponsors, they didn't know they got fired. I just stopped showing up in the relationship. And it was later that one of my subsequent sponsors said, did you have a conversation with your previous sponsor to let them know how much you appreciated them and that it's time for you to move on? Well, that was a huge lesson for me, because I was never taught that in real life. If I never wanted to see that person again because of whatever, I just didn't see that person again. And what I found out through that experience was that there's a healthy way of having a conversation with someone, uncomfortable, but yet healthy, of saying, thank you so much, and this is no longer working for me, but I really appreciated you during this time period. And being okay with having that uncomfortable conversation. And so now, even when someone approaches me and they share with me, because I always do an intake with them, And I say, have you had sponsors before? I want to know, what was your experience? Was it good? Was it bad? What worked? What didn't work? And I always ask, does your sponsor know that you're no longer considering them as a sponsor? And if the answer is no, my input is, I'd really like you to go back to that person and thank them for their service and let them know that it is time for you to move on. And for me, that having to do that behavior, having to do that assignment from my one sponsor and understanding the benefit of doing that for my health and recovery, and then seeing my sponsees do the same thing, it allows me, keeping it back to the me, to have healthy relationships out there in the world. Because if I'm supposed to practice these principles in all of my affairs, that means in my personal life, in my business life, in my family life, in whatever arena it may be, I've taken on the task of really doing my best to work my program in all areas of my life. And sometimes that sucks. Sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes I really want to skip that necessary step, but it's so valuable to do so. So with that, I'm gonna pass. Is there anyone that has something that they would like to share, comment? Crosstalk is fine in this particular venue. Faith, I see your hand raised up. Faith, please unmute and share.
Hi guys, I hope you can hear me. I'm outside.
We can hear you perfectly.
Great. So my experience with sponsorship, and thank you for doing this forum, I don't think it's been perfect, but it's been, it is what it is, right? So I find that in our group it's very difficult to get a sponsor. And then there was someone, like, I really admired the way she changed. She became like, you could just see this peace in her. And I asked if she'd be my sponsor, and she agreed. And we did it through an AA booklet. And about halfway through, she told me she was leaving Coda. She was going to the church. And I was sort of left. I didn't really like the AA workbook. So I just sort of kept going to the meetings. And then I sponsored someone. And then we tried to use because I didn't have a lot of experience, tried to use the 30 questions. And my goodness, there's so much in that first question that before we got to the end of that, he left Coda. Well, I don't know if he left Coda, but he stopped contacting me, and he stopped going to meetings. And I just say, well, each person has to deal with what they have to deal with. Okay. And then COVID happened. So I still felt a need to do something. Actually, it was just before COVID happened. So I was in one of my meetings, and I think one of the older members with obviously a lot of experience asked, I forget how he asked for it, because he wasn't offering to sponsor and he wasn't looking for a sponsor. But I think he was asking for someone to phone him or something like that. Anyway, I asked if he wanted to do co-sponsorship. And he asked me what that was. I didn't know. But we've been phoning each other every week ever since. Sometimes I don't know if it's what sponsorship should be. But I always know I've got someone I can talk to who understands Coda. So that's great for me, and he seems to get something out of it too. I've never set any boundaries, or sometimes I've gone in with like, oh, well, we'll talk about the way this will go and the way that will go, and that hasn't worked out. And then one other experience, I went on to the Coda website forum, and someone was looking for a sponsor, and I thought, oh, higher power has given me this person. We connected, had one email, and then she decided to leave, or say she said it wasn't right for her at the time. So then I figured, well, it's my higher power telling me that I've got enough to do, and if I need to sponsor something will turn up. And that is my entire story about me and sponsorship. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Faith. You brought up some really great topics, and I want to point out, I don't know if everyone can see this on the screen. This is a piece of Coda literature that I refer to quite a bit. And when I have a new sponsee, I have them read this book, because within here, and then we discuss what's in here. Because some of the topic matters in here is what are the sponsor relationships? As sponsees, what are our rights? As sponsees, we have the right to, and then it has a list of the things that the sponsees have a right to do, to be.
Can you show me the book again, Gail?
Absolutely. Can you see it?
Yeah, I think I have that.
It's one of the book. It's called a booklet, I think, in the thing.
Yeah.
And then some of the other topic matters here is why aren't there more Coda sponsors? A lot of times, folks are afraid of sponsoring. One of the when I sponsor someone, I make it really clear that service is extremely important, and for me to be their sponsor, I need to know that they're doing service in some form or fashion. I also want them to know that as soon as they get to a certain point in their work with me, that they need to be willing to be a sponsor, and that I will guide them through that process, because it's a scary thing. I remember the first time my sponsor said, it's time for you to be a sponsor. And I thought, oh, heck no. I was having heart palpitations. I was having panic attacks. And I thought, oh my gosh, no. I'm going to mess someone else's life up. I'm still early in recovery. I don't know what I'm doing. And she said, excuse me, you're thinking that you're sponsoring. You're not sponsoring. It's your higher power through you that is going to work with that individual. And you can always ask for help while still keeping anonymity to your sponsor, saying, hey, I've got this situation going on. I don't know what to do. Please help me. And so I let my sponsees know part of this program is being of service as a sponsor. I don't know where my life would be if I didn't have people willing to step up to the plate along the way to be my sponsor. I wouldn't be where I am today. I don't know that I'd still be in the program, quite honestly, because there were some times I didn't want to come back. Life was happening. I wasn't a happy camper. Let's see, what else in this? This book is loaded with information. What is the role of the sponsor? Who can sponsor? A wonderful thing to know is one of these questions that says, isn't it codependent to want to run someone else's life? We're not running anyone's life. We're aiding them in going through the workbook and with the steps and the traditions and getting them to understand them. Do we have to have a sponsor in order to be a sponsor? It is absolutely recommended. What if we're uncomfortable with the commitment? And there's an answer to that one. How much time will sponsoring take up? Okay. Can we sponsor if we haven't worked all 12 steps? My answer is absolutely. You can sponsor up to the level that you've been sponsored. And the goal is don't let your sponsee get ahead of you. Come on, keep working. That's kind of like a little incentive for me. It's like, oh, keep going because they're catching up fast. I remember, okay, here's my thought process when I came into this program. I was a control freak. I'm still trying to recover from that one. And I interviewed my sponsor, first one. And I said, okay, so I just need to know the plan. because I need to know the plan too. That's control. The plan is, in my brain, I'm thinking, okay, we should, if there's 12 steps and there's 12 traditions, we break this down, I should be able to get through a step and a tradition once a month. So that means 12 steps, 12 traditions. We should be able to get this through in 12 months. And that's my goal. That's my plan. I want to be able to graduate in that 12 months. And I remember my sponsor's face. And she's like, yeah, it's going to take as long as it's going to take, because some of these are not going to be necessarily that easy. And you don't get to graduate this program. And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm a goal-oriented person. I'm a get to point A to point Z, and how quickly can I get there and be effective? She's like, no, you don't understand. You're not going to graduate this program. And if all goes right, you'll be working these steps and traditions over and over and over again. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And now I have fun when I get to say that to my new sponsees. This is a lifelong process. And I remember when my husband came into my life, I had some years under my belt, and he kept saying, what is this Coda thing? Why do you have to go to these meetings? You have to go every single week. And what happens in there? And when are you going to be finished? When are you going to be fixed? When are you going to be whatever? And I'm like, this program is what allows me to have a healthy relationship with you, not want to kill you when you're not doing things the way I want you to do them, and still love you through the process. And he was a bit of a unique individual. He didn't stick around as long as I wanted him to before he passed away. But it allowed us to have a reasonably healthy relationship. And I remember when it was 2-3 months into the relationship, and I said to him, I want you to know we've been fighting, and I'm good now. And he's looking at me like, okay, you're a little insane. What are you talking about? We've been fighting. I didn't know we've been fighting. I'm like, in my head, I've been fighting with you. And this is what I was angry with you about. And I really needed to work my way through it. And I didn't say anything to you. I had to work with my sponsor to get through it. And by the way, we're okay now. I get it. It was really about me and not about you. And this is the behavior that took me to that place. So if you are willing to work on that behavior, it would help me in my sanity. But I'm telling you that I still love you no matter what. And I remember his response was, this is what you get from these meetings? If this is how we're going to fight, keep going to these meetings because I like the way you fight. This is what this program has taught me. So, oh, thank you, Linda. You put it in the chat right there. It's sold right here. Woohoo, Linda, you're supporting me. I like it. All right, anyone else that wants to share their experience, strength, and hope of looking for a sponsor, being a sponsor? Come on, raise your hands. Be gutsy. Come on. Or just unmute yourself. Linda, I see your hand. Let's share. You have to unmute. There you go.
Yeah. Now you want to see my ceiling? Okay. I have a couple of observations. As you read through initially and described types of sponsorship, I said to myself, I've done co-sponsoring, I've had one-on-one sponsoring. I've also had something else, and that is studying the steps in a group. And Coda offers a free download describing that. And you know, when a new group starts up and there are no sponsors or no experienced Coda members in the area, that can get you over the hump. I look back on the co-sponsoring that I participated in, and I can pinpoint certain mistakes that we made because none of us were experienced. For example, we worked through the 4th step, and when we got to the 5th step, one of us turned to the rest of us and said, hey, we shared our 4th step all throughout. We've essentially done the 5th step simultaneously. And we all went, okay. And we went on our way. Now, that is not how I would do it. That is not how I do it nowadays, because I have been shown the value of sitting, you know, until both of our rear ends go numb and listening to the entirety of the 4-step inventory. And I would like to say that in the history of being sponsored, I've experienced several different styles of being sponsored, some of which included the use of emoticons that in some areas of Coda, people pass around faithfully at meetings, and people show up eagerly at the meetings so they can look at the sheet of paper and say, this is how I feel. That speaks directly to a codependent's, Linda's as a codependent, inability to tell you truthfully, because I have no idea, how I really feel. So I found that to be important. And that's something that I did initially. Another thing that I found was a real emphasis on a relationship with the sponsee with their inner child. And that's something that I've only slowly grown into. So I guess what I'm reporting is that over time, my manner of sponsoring has truly metamorphosed. And since I began using the Green Book, I really have experienced something wonderful. People occasionally try to tell me, oh, I want to go through the steps first. We can do the traditions later. And I think, right, okay, well, this book was designed by experienced people, and the order is step, tradition, and that's how we're going to do it. If you want to do it with somebody else a different way, be my guest. And the growth that happens from going from work on step 1 to work on tradition 1 and so on and so forth is phenomenal. So I can't speak highly enough of using the Green Book as a basis for working one's way through the basics of Coda recovery. And the other thing, you mentioned something else, Gail, that I wanted to, it escapes me right now. Perhaps I'll remember later. Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you so much, Linda. And I'm so glad you mentioned about group sponsorship. And that's something that could be added to our literature, this piece of literature, because group sponsorship, we had a similar situation in my home group 5 years ago where we didn't have people willing to do sponsorship, and I couldn't sponsor everybody, not in that level. And so we started a group workbook study group. And we would meet an hour and a half prior to our regular home group, those that were committed. It was a closed group, and we worked through it, step, tradition, all the way through. And on the average, it takes us about a year. Right now, we're in our 5th year. And we've got individuals coming back a second and a third time because now they're ready to go deeper and deeper, and they can help co-facilitate. So now we have co-facilitators who can rotate their service, facilitating each week. And it's mind-blowing. And what happens in our experience is that the cohesiveness, the bonding between the women, because this is a women's only particular group, is so strong. So we have like a group text where someone's having a rough moment and they'll say, who's available to talk? One of us will respond, and we're right there for them. And so what it's done is it's created a community within a community, and it is creating really great sponsors in the process. So I'm so glad you brought up the group sponsorship. I really am. And I'm like you, I will not sponsor anyone without the Green Book and working the way it was designed. Okay, Margarita, you've got your hand up.
Oh, thank you. Like I said, I'm very early in the program, so I'm learning a lot from today, so thank you very much. But I took my first call yesterday from another member of Coda, and she requested a call, and I put my hand up and she gave me a call, and we had a chat about an issue that she was dealing with. Whereas previously, as a codependent, I would be, trying to fix her problem or give advice, but working through the program now, I understand that the most important thing is just to be there and listen, which I did. And she asked me to share whether I've had any similar experiences. And in fact, I had exactly the same experience. And I shared that with her. And she said, wow, thank you so much. Because of your share, I now know what to do. And it made me realize, and that's something that you said before, Gail, and the reason why we come across people sharing these things with us or taking that call compared to someone else taking that call was because I was able to give her that information that she needed. But it also helped me because I haven't shared that information with most people, definitely not a stranger. So I thought that that's a form of sponsorship as well, that just taking that call. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And you know what, that is a really important point in that, you know, I call them outreach calls. You know, if I'm in one of my virtual meetings, I will put a message in the chat, you know, giving my my phone number, my time zone, and my preferred hours of contact. And I say, you know, text me first because, you know, I also have a business, a personal life, and other responsibilities. So text me and we'll figure out a time that we can talk. And it is so, you know what? It is so heartwarming for myself when I can reach out and find out that someone else had a similar experience, because now I don't feel so alone. And it's the same when someone shares something with me and they're like, do you understand? And I'm like, oh, yes, I do. And without telling them my whole story, I can give them little snips and say, this is where I was when I came into the program, this is where I am now, and this is where I'm heading to, and this is what I did along the way. And it really just helps. And I too, oh my gosh, when I first started this, the natural tendency to want to give advice and fix their problem was overwhelming. That alone was, you know, overwhelming for me to get it. I'm not here to fix their problem. I'm here to share my experience, strength, and hope, and give them a place to be able to talk. Because so many of us, myself included, I need safe places to talk. When I was a kid growing up and things were happening to me, I didn't have a safe place to talk. I didn't have a safe place to say, such and such is happening and so-and-so is doing this to me, and I have no voice and I can't talk because I have to keep the secret. I don't have to keep the secrets anymore. I can find trustworthy people in the programs, in the rooms, and say, can I talk with you? It may be something that so-and-so shares in the meeting, and I think, oh my God, maybe they're the one I can talk to about this situation. And so that's why even doing service as being willing to take a phone call, to me, is huge. I've had times in both of my recovery programs where I felt I was going down. I was going down big time, and I was going to do something that was not healthy, and I needed someone to reach out to. And so now I literally, anyone I talk to in my programs, their first name is in my contact database. Their last name is either Coda or AA. And then their last initial, in case there's someone else who has that first name and is in the same program. And so I know if I'm having a Coda moment, all I got to do is look up the last name of Coda in my phone directory, and I know I've got a slew of people. And HP will take me to the right person each time. Sometimes I have to go through a few people until I get someone live, and that's when I know that's the person I needed to talk to. And you know, when I need to, when that happens, I will say it's a 411 or it's a 911 call. 911 is, holy Maloney, I am in trouble. I need somebody now. Or 411, okay, whenever someone's available, can you talk to me? And so the outreach calls are amazing, and they can lead to a great sponsor relationship if there's a connection there. Could be a, you know, what do we call it? The co-sponsorship, where you're sponsoring each other because you've got something in common. All right, Faith, I see your hand.
Hi, thank you, Gail. I had a question. Is group sponsorship the same as doing the studies as a group, or are they two different things?
I'll answer, and then anyone else can answer as well. Co-sponsorship is typically when you have two individuals who are sponsoring each other.
No, I said group sponsorship.
Okay, well, group sponsorship is when you have a group of individuals who are working the program together with typically a facilitator. And that facilitator is not necessarily the sponsor for each of the individuals in the group. So for example, in the one that I lead, there is a requirement. There are several requirements. One of the requirements is they must have a sponsor. And the sponsor could be a co-sponsor within the group. Then there's other agreements. I am not necessarily everyone sponsor in that group. That is not my goal. I want the ladies in that particular group to co-sponsor each other if necessary, because they're going to grow in the process. Does that help?
So that is group sponsorship.
Yes and no. The group itself as a collective is not necessarily the sponsor for each other. So let's say that Faith, you're in a group and I've got 14 ladies in the group. I'm the facilitator, and I'm going to advise you that you need to have a sponsor. It is better that you have a sponsor, one primary. However, sometimes our sponsor is not available at the moment and we're having a crisis. That's when the other ladies within that group can take a phone call and help you through that urgent need at the moment. But a sponsor, for me, a sponsor knows a lot about me because I have trusted them enough to share with them everything possible that I feel safe enough to share. Some of the things that I need to share with an individual, I may have to build my trust with them before they have every little secret, because I need to know they're safe. So in that regards, the way that we handled it is the group is the support, but you have a primary sponsor. That's how we do it.
Okay.
Could you elaborate on how you do it with your groups?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Did you ask?
Yes.
Ask me?
Does your group do it kind of similar or a little bit different? How would you have answered Faith's question?
Radically differently. At a time when essentially there was one person to sponsor and that none of us wanted to sponsor us, a bunch of us got together and it was a group and we were listening to each other's responses and working our way through the steps. It was, by contrast with what you described, it was like herding cats. I mean, we could have benefited from the experience, strength, and hope of a long-term member. This was years ago. We made it through, but what we learned was not as much as we would have learned from a situation such as the one you described.
Thank you. And we've been blessed in our groups now to have enough ladies coming back into it, or not, but still being in the sponsorship pool. In other words, we've got a good amount of sponsors now in our home group, whereas we had me many years ago because a lot of people had kind of fallen away from the group. So I knew that I couldn't sponsor everyone. It wasn't my job. And so I knew that the solution that my HP gave me was start a group. And that's how we got it going. So now in my home group, right now, we've got at least 10 ladies who are qualified to sponsor. Are they all sponsoring? No. Some of them are still scared to sponsor. And that's where we just have to keep encouraging them to get out of their comfort zone and be willing to sponsor. Okay, we are coming up, we're about 7 minutes to the hour. Anyone else have anything that they would like to share based upon what they've heard, something that they'd like to add, questions, anything? Going once, going twice. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and wrap up. And once I wrap up, then I'm going to stop the recording. We will still have the room open if anyone wishes to say anything, share anything that will not be on the recording. Okay, so this has been the forum on sponsorship. Our next forum, it is always on, let me get my calendar up really quick. It is the last Saturday of the month. Oh, this will be fun. It will be on October 31st, Halloween. That will make, I'm going to have to come up with a really good special topic for that one. That should be perfect. Okay, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and have us finish out with the closing prayer. If you would like to join, I would like you to unmute. Before I do that, Jim, I see your hand. You'll have to unmute.
I didn't do my H&I thing.
Oh, yes, please. Thank you.
This is about H&I, and it won't take long. Just a few minutes, we're a little bit over. I joined H&I at the 2018 Coda Service Conference, and I started my Coda journey in 2015. Like so many things on my journey, I didn't know I was ready until the opportunity found me in 2019. I had started to sponsor a member of my home group, and I'm amazed at how well we related and how many things we had in common, in addition to codependence. At the beginning of 2020, I was given the chance to sponsor some inmates. I bought a composition book for each one, and I could make notes about where we were, what we were working on, and the dates. It's important to keep track of that. The pen name for me was Coda, and then it would be like 2032 or something like that, so you don't use your real name. I can send my replies directly to the inmates with my return address as the office in Tucson, Arizona. The letters from the inmates are sent to our Tucson address, and if they are clear enough, they are scanned and forwarded to me at my email address. If not, I get the real letter. My conversation with each is unique, and I keep the names of my sponsees in the margins or in the top margin of my journals. This is part of my recovery. Each one teaches me something about myself. One is serving a life sentence, another is a sex offender. They give the words of the welcome new meaning, where it says no matter how traumatic your past or despairing your present may seem, there is a new day in the program of Codependence Anonymous. The resilience in their search for meaning and truth supplies me with energy and focus. I believe I was born precious and free. I was created with everything I need, and all the answers I seek are all within me. The process of recovery brings them out. When I found Coda, I was afraid to speak. I could not share. I was emotionally dysfunctional. Over time, I found clarity and my voice. I finally told my story, and that is when the magic began. I did not know I was ready, and then someone asked me to be their sponsor. And I realized that the miracle and the magic was starting to grow again in such a beautiful way. Sponsorship is part of the process. It brings the answers out that are within us, and we become precious and free. If you would like to sponsor one of our inmates, go to coda.org, type in H&I main page, then click on Inmate Sponsorship Program. This link describes all the relevant information and materials you will need to know to consider this opportunity. And that's all I had written. And thank you for letting me read.
Thank you, Jim. And I will say that I have been sponsoring a young lady for probably, well, it was before the pandemic, so probably about 8 or 9 months. And I just got assigned a secondary woman to sponsor through the program. And it is a way of being able to serve individuals who's, you know, every one of us come into Coda in a different way. And my bottom was different than the other bottoms, but to bottom out and find yourself starting a program within an institution is something that is very, I'm awestruck, and it is such a blessing to be of service in that way to the inmates. And your anonymity is protected. You follow the guidelines that are given on the H&I page on the website, and it's a great way of being of service. All right, with that, I am going to go ahead and stop the recording.